Welcome to No Question About That. I'm Ed with Wayne today to talk about today's football. United 2, Manchester City 0 in the FA Cup semi-finals. We've got no other United games on today, right? Just that one.
I was hoping he was going to go Newcastle 0, Manchester United 1. What a resolute performance from Peter Schmeichel in goal, and what a great decisive goal for Eric.
Let's run it all the way back.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Well, a word from the women today. I didn't catch the game, so I haven't got any thoughts on it. But third FA Cup final in a row, making a habit of beating City as well, which is always a good habit to have.
Yeah, and also, and also you had some players missing, but I think with United, I know we've talked about this before, like in this, I think it's the state of the women game, really, and the way that United are as a club at the moment, that the state of flux is always perpetual. And to have this period of what looks like stability, first of all, with nice run of results, in terms of like getting there for a third year in a row, but also with Mark Skinner signing the new contract, it does bode well, which is considering the priority that's not placed on the women's side, it's good to know that there's something that's functional rather than dysfunctional at the club.
Well, on the recruitment side of things with the women's team, they seem to have got things mostly right. I mean, some big names have left. Russo, Earps, Onabache, and so on. But they've been replaced with what feel like upgrades. So, I mean, obviously I didn't catch today's game, but Fallon Tullis-Joyce had a brilliant season.
Yeah.
Made you saw the clip of her fantastic double save today. Mark Skinner's quote after the game, she told me that's her job, travelling her in a Roy Keane. So, but she's been brilliant. So does Jade Riviere at right back, apparently. And Elizabeth Turner scoring goals. Grace Clinton got a goal today. Mixed season in terms of performances, but a very talented young player. So, all's looking good on the women's side, despite the lack of focus and investment. I think you're right. That new 4-year contract for Skinner just gives everyone some certainty.
Yeah.
Even if behind the scenes, when I ask people about him, they tell me he's a bit of a knob. But there you go. He's got the team playing well. They will likely qualify for the Champions League as well, and on the up and up, while having the third or fourth biggest budget in the WSL. So there you go. All right. Men's team.
That's so good.
Which shower shall we start with today? It kind of expected defeat. Let's put it in context. We don't need to freak out. Less than 72 hours after Lyon last week, and we got Lyon coming up on Thursday. Those are, in the context of the season, way, way, way bigger games. 5 changes today. I was kind of expecting to lose, given that Newcastle are chasing the Champions League and they really, really need it and all of that. But 4 goals, every single one of them included one or more defensive errors.
Yeah.
Can't account for that, can you?
No. Where to begin? So, can you remember, it's a point I return to quite often with the Mourinho era. Where did it start to go wrong? And I always say, one of the critical things with United for managers to understand, which Ollie actually understood because he was part of the system, is that every single game is a game where you've got to win. And I don't think even Mourinho was a serial winner and had that kind of attitude, didn't realise how severe it was at United. Then at the end of his first season, we played Arsenal or Spurs in between the Celta Vigo games. Let's say Arsenal, I think it was. And he rested a bunch of players for the Europa game. And I've always cited that as systematic of a drop off in standards and kind of contributing to this idea that there's some games that United can afford to not turn it on for. But I was thinking about that today because obviously the sandwich between the Europa tie, like you were talking about there, and I think about the players that we had then. And I think, and that was a bad United side compared to great United sides, and the drop off in standard to expect a defeat today, to expect it to arrive somewhat in the way that it did, hoping that the changes that the manager was making would mitigate some of that, and yet he didn't do any of that, which is, I mean, that's the worrying thing for me, because a good manager is lucky and a bad manager is unlucky. And I don't want to categorise Amorim as a bad manager yet, but when he makes changes, even though they should be made, maybe he's held the trigger for a little bit too long and the damage is already done. So, or maybe, it's not all Amorim's fault. Maybe, again, we point the finger at the poor recruitment that's gone on for years and years, which means that Onana's replacement is a terrible goalkeeper. And it contributes to what we saw today, which obviously he was at fault for the last one, but not. He was already sort of flapping in the first half. He wasn't. I don't have him an error for the other three, but he didn't. He wasn't instilling certainty. So my point is that he made changes that were necessary, but then maybe he waited too long to make some of those, and the system doesn't help. I still look at it and think, now we're going to look at this and say, was it a mistake to drop Onana? I still don't think it was. But like you mentioned the tweet, and I'm going to call it up because I don't know if you're being facetious, but I think it's a fair question to ask. Should Tom Eaton play on Thursday? No, yeah. I wasn't being serious, thinking,
but yeah, I know.
I know, but that's what I'm thinking, though.
Question, isn't it?
You were, but it is a fair question. Now I'm thinking, I'm being serious. I don't think there's any future in playing Onana. I don't think he's a future United goalkeeper. I think if we're being deadly serious about this, he's not going to be in the United team that wins anything because he's too poor. Neither is Altay. So what do you do? Is the manager in a situation now? I know we are going to talk about the Newcastle, but I'm talking as a reaction to the Newcastle game, because this was a very damaging defeat, regardless of the changes. Everything rests, and as the manager has admitted with his selection, he doesn't have to say in the words, everything rests on what happens on Thursday in the medium and short term for the football club. So much of his future rests on that as well. So do you now make changes regarding the system and the personnel, knowing that game is so vital on Thursday? And I think that this game and this defeat and this performance has put that into much sharper focus than it needed to be.
Yeah, well, okay, few things to unpack there. Yes, damaging defeat, so we can kind of brush it off and go, yeah, it didn't matter. We kind of expected the defeat. I was hoping there'd be more competitiveness in this. I mean, I do think it's individual mistakes and very basic ones, and we can go through each of them, that have contributed to the 4 goals. I mean, Newcastle were the better side today anyway, outside of those stupid mistakes, but it should have been more competitive, and then really could have brushed it off more easily. So there's that. We should get to all the mistakes that were made. On the keeper situation, Onana will be back in goal on Thursday. I was being cheeky. There's no doubt about that. He will 100% be back. There's been enough opportunities for Amorim to change the goalkeeper out. I suspect he just doesn't think Altay is good enough. One of the reasons, it's not just because of today, is that he's just not that good with his feet. That's, I think Laurie Whitwell mentioned that on Twitter. That's the kind of thinking internally. And we know he's good with his feet. He's just not much good with his hands, which for a keeper is kind of important. You know what is also important, Wayne? If you're a central defender in a back 3 system and you're the key man, being able to defend, that's also important. Yeah. And I don't want to single any one player out, because there's quite a few we can have a go at today, and we should liberally spread it around just so we're I don't get accused of being toxic here. But Victor Lindelof, his 275th game for Manchester United. And I would suggest after about 5 of those 275, we worked out that he probably wasn't good enough. And off air, just before we came on, you said every time the transfer window comes around, he conveniently gets injured. Well, he's out of contract this summer, so there's nothing he can do. Unless he's got filth on Sir Jim, he's not getting a new contract and he'll be gone. But this was, I would suggest, one of his worst ever performances from United, and quite predictable. You look at the lineup and you look at Isaac, who's legit one of the finest strikers in Europe and having a great season. And we saw that today. Yeah, very high quality player against a very, very mediocre central defender who just didn't look like he could be bothered. Let Isaac go for the first one, just completely ignored him. Was it a third goal? He let 2 balls roll across the 6-yard. 2, not 1. 2. It went back one way and then went back the other, and he just ignored them both. And he's not the reason United are so bad, but he's one of, let's call it, 40 really poor transfers United made over the last 10 years that's got us into this situation, right?
Yeah, but sorry, just on the Lindelof point,
Yeah.
I think you could have put any collection of our defenders in, and I wouldn't have been surprised to have seen that. Do you know what I mean? Like, well, I've made the point before that United don't have safety in numbers. So I'm with you completely that there were a lot of individual mistakes today and they contributed to that. I just don't think if we'd run the changes and there were different personnel in there, I wouldn't be too confident that different players would have made those mistakes. And I do think that the system contributes to that somewhat. There's no hiding from that today. That I just think that United, regardless of, I think by now, 4 or 5 months, there's a long enough time for United to, no matter who the players are, and I know we're talking about a bad bunch of players or a poor bunch of players, that there's some kind of familiarity in what they're supposed to be doing in the system. And I think that they by and large there is. It's just that it's very bad. I think
but we've been seeing more. We've been seeing more. I mean, there was the Bruno Josh Zirkzee play where there's like echoes of 99 in the Camp Nou. Josh should have finished it low, like Andy Cole did that time. Went high. Unfortunately, that as much improvement as he's made, and he really has progressed a lot. If you think about his narrative arc between getting booed off, getting subbed on half an hour in the game against Newcastle at Old Trafford to today, he's had a big redemption arc there. Josh Zirkzee, I still have my doubts about whether he'll really make it in the Premier League because of his lack of pace, but that could have been a brilliant goal. So there are bits, and we saw against Lyon some of the attacking play just kind of coming together. And generally speaking, I actually think the defending has been more secure as we've gone on through the 6 months of Amorim, 5-6 months, whatever it is. There's 21 games in the Premier League, isn't it? And however many in the Europa and other cups.
But we're still no further on. We're no better to watch.
Oh no! I mean, in those 21
like,
games, it's 10 defeats and 6 wins. So, like for any Manchester United manager, that's pretty shocking. Like outside of the context of he's coming in mid-season and we changed the system, and he doesn't have the right players, he would have been under even more pressure, right, for the results, right? So the context of he's coming mid-season, he didn't want to take the job mid-season, he knows he hasn't got the right players for this system, but they've gone, okay, we'll go with it anyway. That's what's saving him from more strenuous critique. He will, unless we win the Europa League, which is, you've got to say is a big doubt, he will start next season like with no bank of credit whatsoever, and he'll be under pressure if things don't go right. But that's for the future. Like right now, it's a legit bad United side that is, you look at the players, you can't say they are the 14th worst collection of players in the Premier League. So they're definitely underperforming their talent and definitely underperforming their pay scale, which is, I don't know, what have we got? The probably guesstimating right now the 4th biggest wage budget in the Premier League, something like that. So they're well underperforming that. But it's just the context that is saving Amorim from even deeper scrutiny than he is getting.
Can I just a point on Amorim, because like as I've on this podcast before with Ole and with Ten Hag, I'm never one to go in on the manager too early, but I am going to give him his valid criticism here, and one of them pertains to Casemiro, but it's a wider point I'm making on this, because I'm not going to say that Casemiro is an overperforming player or anything like that, but I believe that there's elements of the team selection that you can understand with a manager. It goes back to what I was saying about making you look. So he bought into the narrative that Casemiro was finished. This kind of perpetuated by Carragher saying the football's left him nonsense, which I think is a dangerous thing to do. So, and he's come out and said in recent weeks, like, we were surprised by Casemiro's qualities and we had to find time to learn about them. I mean, we're talking about one of the most established players in world football. He's on a steep decline, don't get me wrong, but nothing about what he's done should have surprised you, because first of all, you've got his record before United. United are the biggest, one of the still the highest 3 profile clubs in the world. So everything that's been there, everything decline and all is there to see. But so if you're not aware of that, coming in, that's a big concern anyway. You needed months to work out what Casemiro does. Well, obviously he's going to struggle in the two-man midfield, as a lot of those players do, because they were players who, I'm not saying they thrive in a three-man midfield, but they function better as a three-man midfield. You can settle that with almost all of those midfielders.
Personally, I don't think that it's the system that is the issue, right? Like Amorim has said, it's about principles of play. But that piece in the triangle in midfield, every single one of our midfielders, you are right, would be more comfortable in a 3 than the 2, including Kobbie Mainoo, who might end up getting frozen out as a result.
Yeah, and well, it's an issue. I'm not saying it's the issue. I'm saying that's one issue within the system. So the other one, for example, is, and this is, again, I think that this is 101 for managers, and I think maybe this is where his inexperience comes against him, is starting Amas on the left-hand side and putting Yoro as the inside centre back. Now, I don't think that cost us to any great detail today, but I think that that's a rookie mistake for he. There was the moment in the first start. Oh no, it was the first half where Shaw had his hands all over Amas and Yoro.
At the corner, yeah.
No, that was the corner. It wasn't the system, and it wasn't the way that it was set up. But he still ended up with 2 teenagers defending against this senior player, and it looked foolish because you shouldn't have players like that. You should have had an Harry Maguire stepping in there and doing something. Lindelof's a bit of a wet blanket, so he wasn't going to do that. The point I'm making with this is that if you set your system up where there's a systematic fault there because you've got too much experience in a vital position on the pitch, where Newcastle are flying in those areas, they're already confident. You need to be, with this United side, you need to be as compact as possible. You need to have as much experience in different areas, and if you're going to decide to play rookies, and I thought it was a gamble, Amas, fortunately, and Yoro, I don't think they let us down too much. Well, Yoro was suspect on the goals for sure, but Amas, I don't think let anybody down. But I think you are not helping your team in any kind of defensive or offensive situation by doing that. Now, the issue that United have got with so many defenders in the side, and we've talked about this before, because sometimes it's as many as 5 with the way that they set up, and it was again today, that it doesn't help the possession of the football. United there was a point in the first half where they had 63% possession, right? Now, I looked at this because I was like, okay, what is getting my goat about why this is bad possession for a United team, and why are we so poor? Why does it look like we're going to concede when we've got 65% of the ball at one point, right? Bruno, I've listed them all here, so I'll run through them quick. It's not going to be a long thing. So first of all, there were Bruno, as he tends to do. I know he's one of the better like, we've had this conversation. I am round to your way of thinking more that I'd rather him take the risks, but there were 3 risks that he took: 2 with dummies, and 1 with a long, and he does this one quite often, overestimating the pace of whoever's like Højlund or Garnacho, because the pass is always short, or even if it gets to the feet, that player's bullied out of the ball straight away. The long goalkeeper punts, which just do not stick. They stick more with Zirkzee, but they still don't stick enough. They're still only like 30% of the time, as opposed to 0% of the time with Højlund. Dalot is allowed to get into positions where he gives it away, as he did for multiple times, not just for one of the goals he did early in the first half as well. He gave it away. There's any reasonable opponent analysis would look at those kind of things. Also, like the tendency we talked about, that midfield isn't really good possession midfield. Like City's midfield, if you gave them 65% of the ball, you're not going to get the ball off them, really. They will be the ones giving it away, like in offensive areas. Whereas an opponent analysis of this United side would say, give United the ball as much as they want, because they are their own worst enemy if we're an organised team, because they run out of ideas, they don't move enough, and they're not inventive enough, so they start to make silly mistakes. You can see that through any combination of players that United play, regardless of whether or not it's Lindelof or whatever. They play a formation at the moment which maximises the weaknesses, and doesn't maximise the abilities that we've got.
I know, but I kind of feel it's a redundant conversation in a sense, because of Amorim is just building with this system, right? So the question really is, can you evolve United's squad to get in the players that would be more comfortable? You're absolutely right. United cannot play out of the defensive third into the midfield third, and they don't have the players unless Bruno is playing in a deeper area to progress out of the deeper third into the attacking third. And then if Bruno is in a deeper area, They can't create chances in the attacking third because Bruno's not there, right? So he always has to be two players in one.
Yep.
And they were exacerbated by the changes today. So, if Harry Maguire or Martinez aren't in the side, United can't pass out of defence. I mean, I think Yoro's improved in his ball carrying over the time he's been here. He's got more confident, but he's a average passer. He's certainly not bad. The rest of them are pretty terrible. So United had a real problem with that ball progression piece today. And then in central midfield, Manuel Ugarte will rank at the top of all the stats for tackles, interceptions, ground covered, defensive actions. Like on the defensive side of things, he's in the top 5% or top 5th percentile, top 5 percentiles, right? So for all of those things, ball progression is right down the bottom, right? So that is the problem with the United. Do not have a ball carrier, ball progressor in central midfield who's got the whole package. So if you have Bruno in there, he can do it, but he takes a lot of risks. You have Eriksen in there, he doesn't have the legs. If you have Casemiro in there, he doesn't have the legs and loses the ball a lot, 25% of the time. Like if you have Kobbie Mainoo in there, he's brilliant in possession in those small spaces, but isn't perhaps the most physical. It would be more comfortable in a 3. So there's a lot of compromises that have to happen. Just a couple of data points, which is easy. United rank mid-table for progressive actions completed, right? So we are mediocre when it comes to completing build-ups. We are second worst only to Crystal Palace for ball progression not completed in the danger zone. That is giving the ball away in our defensive third or the opposition's attacking third. And then you look at Newcastle today, who are one of the best pressing sides in the country, like Eddie Howe, little shit of a manager. Get well soon, Eddie. But he has got them like doing that pressing thing brilliantly. They're incredibly aggressive and they're very quick to drop back into a mid-block if it fails, which often it didn't. And they're the most physical team in the country in that central 3. So you've got a problem with United cannot build up out of the back. Newcastle, brilliant and pressing. They're going to create a lot of errors. They managed to do that today and they benefited from a few of those. So, like, that's a long way of saying with a few data points. I mean, you are right. We've got a system here that maximizes our weaknesses and highlights them and reduces our strengths. But he's fitting a lot of square pegs in round holes right at the moment. And it's going to be a big, big job to evolve that over the summer to be something that's not the 14th worst side in the Premier League next season.
So my point on that is, I'm now at the point, having seen enough of him, knowing that we, so much rides on the Europa League. And don't worry, listeners, we will get to the specifics of the game because I know people want to talk about those.
It's no question about that. We like at least 25, 30 minutes of context before we talk about the actual football.
But who wants to run over those mistakes? Okay, so yeah, my issue with it's a big issue really, is that so much rides on qualifying for the Champions League. So let's say that we don't, because it's reasonable to think that we won't have the turnover of finances to be able to do that. Now, that means that realistically, that system isn't going to be functional within 12 months if we're being generous, because it's going to still need too many players coming in. And let's say, for the benefit of optimism, that he brings in 3 players and they all hit the ground running and they're all fit all season. There's still going to be too many flaws within the rest of it. That
for sure.
It might take United forward. It might do, because we've still got no guarantee that it'll work. Anyway, the other thing that concerns me, though, is that let's say we don't win the Europa League and we don't bring in the finances, and then we're stuck where we were at the end of the summer window, which is manoeuvring, and in the winter window as well, trying to manoeuvre what we've got to raise the finances, which means sacrificing some of the better players that we've got, like Manu or Garnacho, regardless of people's opinions on split on their potential. We're still taking a massive risk, because what you're doing is saying, all right, we'll let that player go in order to justify the faith in this system. Now, that means, with no guarantee of this system working, you are taking a double risk, really. First of all, in the investment in a different kind of system, and the risk of letting those players go, because then you'd be left with a manager who come in and wants to play a regular system, and fewer players to do it, and less room to operate. I just think that my concern is the big I feel like we've invested a lot already, time and faith, and there's a big bank of faith to be had there. And I look at him. I want to have faith and then be optimistic about it. I just think it's a massive, massive risk when we're not seeing any evidence of. I don't see it as progress yet, because I still feel like the best thing that I can say is we were unstable under Ten Hag and boring to watch at the end, right? And we were unstable and unfamiliar with the system and boring to watch at the start of Amorim. We're a bit more stable now, but we're still boring. And it doesn't. So at best, we're worse Ten Hag at the moment. So
yeah. But we're strapped in, Wayne. I mean, there's no idea that we're gonna remove him and go to something else in the summer. That's not going to happen, right? The management made a decision to go with this, knowing that we did not have the profile of squad to fit with this manager's very specific system. And we're strapped in. We're riding this train all the way, right? And it is going to make the summer is going to be really big, and that's not on Amorim. It's going to be on the management to do the deals that make this happen. The one thing I'd say, if we don't qualify for the Europa League, there's just two things you could think about. Like, you can think about working with a much smaller squad next year, right? They're going to let a lot of players go. We know that. Eriksen, Lindelof, Heaton, one other out of contract are definitely going, they will do their best to. I mean, there's not a chance that Rashford, Sancho come back. Anthony, they'll try and get any kind of deal they can. And then the other questions after that would be, well, do we sacrifice one of, say, the younger forwards that haven't quite got there yet? Like you could say, Højlund, 2 years, not made it. We're just going to sacrifice him. We won't get a financial benefit from him. From that, there'd be cash, but you'd have to replace him. Or Josh Zirkzee has done enough to get your fee back, basically, and make a small PSR profit as a result, despite progress. You could say that. Or then you're into who else is sellable. You could sell Bruno, but that's not going to happen. You could sell Kobbie Mainoo for a big fee, because there'll be a lot of teams who go, yeah, he's elite in small spaces. We think we can develop his progressive passing. We'll definitely take him on. I suspect he'll sign that new contract at a reasonable wage for his age and profile and stuff like that. And then the other big one is, of course, Alejandro Garnacho, who's had a crap ceiling, but everyone looks at the raw ingredients and goes, yeah, we could turn that into a really good player. And so that could happen. But I suspect if you're not in the Champions League, that's £100 million hit, basically, or in theory, because we haven't made it this season, You just don't buy one big player, basically. You take the 25% reduction in wages, or they don't have to pay the bonuses, whichever way you want to think about it. And there's a £60 million player they don't bring in as a result, and they work with a smaller squad while letting a bunch of players go. That's the other way to do it. But it does mean that you can expect United to be sort of mid-table, or if it all clicks, pushing for a European place next season, then that's not good enough, and we want much, much more than that. And it's one thing resetting our expectations from challenging for the title every year to challenging for cups and Champions League places. It's a very different thing to reset our expectation from, hey, we want to be back there, to, yeah, mid-table's all right. And I don't know that Amorim would get an awful lot of patience from at least the fan base if that's the situation.
But no, should he really? Because, I mean, he's still a manager of Manchester United. I just feel like it is a bit of a bad hand at the moment. I do feel sorry for him. Because,
yeah.
Another
he could really do without. Sorry, I've interrupted you again there, Wayne. But he could really, really do with some of those younger players coming through. That I think the challenge is some of the better ones are more like 16, 17, 18, rather than 18, 19, 20, 21.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even like some of the players have been on the fringes. They've been like Toby Collier, we've seen a bit of. I think everyone at the club likes him, but he's just perpetually injured, and it's a real shame for him. Injuries at this age ruin careers, and he has spent 2 years mostly injured, and that's bad for him. A few of the others, I mean, Jack Morehouse travelled. I don't think he was on the squad today. I think people feel very good about him, and there's the Fletcher brothers as well. We'd love to see some of the really talented young players are doing great in the academy, like Shea Lacey, but a bunch of others. make progress, but they're at least 2 years away from first team ready, I think.
Yeah.
So it can't even be, it's not like even like a Barcelona style, let's look at La Masia, let's look at the academy, and we've got some ready-made solutions in there. We don't have that, I don't think, that are suddenly going to go plug the holes, which just makes it all incredibly challenging. And you've got this period when you have to wind out of our bad PSR position. And that's not, you can't just dump a load of money in. I know like half of the Twitter sphere think that Sir Jim should just whip out his wallet. I mean, he's putting the maximum amount of owner funding for this 3-year cycle already, right? There's no extra money he's allowed to put in. So everything has to be organic. Yeah. It just makes this just the most challenging. I mean, it's not the worst position United have been in their history. You'll know better than anyone like what those worst positions are, but it's definitely in the top few.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this is the thing. Like, this is where I'm saying earlier on, where I said Amram's got to be a lucky manager, because there's so much that has to work out for him in terms of like all his decisions have to be right, and I think it's unfair because he will ultimately pay the price for that. You know, if he pulled off something good, it turns into a good team again, then then this will be an incredible job that he does, and he'll be. I mean, he goes without speaking because there's only 3 managers that have won league titles in United history. 2 of them are Busby and Ferguson, and the other one's more than 100 years ago. So,
is he still around?
Nah, this Magnolia's long gone, I'm afraid. But for like to get United there again, he'd be deserved to be mentioned with those names, obviously, not through achievement, but not just through the achievement of winning something, but by the journey it would take to get there, because this is a very, very grim situation. And like I said, the hit rate of, and it's a phrase that we've used before on this pod, has to be so strong now. And that's so unfair on him, because it's such a time for like incomings and outgoings as well, that you are sacrificing. Like, there are going to be some likable players that will be going, not players who like people will be glad to see the back of. Because I made a point earlier, and it was flippant because I didn't really mean it, but I've said, like, would Martial be? It's a private point, but I'm making it public. Would Martial be any worse than watching Zirkzee and because you're right to give Zirkzee praise, and I'm always the first to do that. But we are talking about improvement in comparison to Højlund. Because the stat that came up before the game on Sky's little graphic was Isaac, 16 games. He's like 16 goals in 16 games. And it flipped to Zirkzee, and he's no goals in his last 18 Premier League games. So there has been improvement in there, but it is by the comparison of how dreadful it was, and it's still absolutely. It's like people were saying about the Forest game was an improvement in performance, but it was dreadful. It is dreadful. It was dreadful. It was dreadful today. Come on, Ed, let's just talk about the goals, because...
Yes, let's do that. We are in the 33rd minute of this podcast. We will actually talk about the game. Let's...
No.
Let's talk about the first one. The first one, and I'm going to pick on Victor Lindelof again, because it just doesn't track the runner. I mean, it's shocking, honestly. He just stood still as Isaac floated into space and played the ball over the top. It's a brilliant pass from a bad first touch and a great finish, but there's absolutely no way a central defender of any kind of quality should allow that to happen. So, sorry, Victor, the Iceman.
This is
where did he get that nickname from, by the way? Because that fucker melts when the temperature's above anything like
I
anything.
am so glad that you brought that up, because it was on my like little notes that I was going to say that the Iceman, like, how some players have traded on a reputation, like, for which is completely conflicting to then
the actual thing you see. Yeah.
Let's say he made one good tackle like in 2 years, then United's like, he'd be all over like, oh, Iceman's back and everything like that. Now, Paul Parker made a great observation about Lindelof maybe 3 years ago. Really good. He said he's a defender that plays with his fists clenched. And I thought, I don't really know what you mean, but I know exactly what you mean by that. There's an anxiety in there, and everyone feels anxious about it.
It's definitely not fist clenched, ready to punch someone.
No,
he would run away from any kind of conflict. Yeah, but yes, he plays with anxiety because he's not confident in his own ability. No one else is, so why should he be?
Yeah, so and that's strange. But then there was that period where, and I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, when he came in and played well against someone, and then you were left thinking, well, he's not good enough to get us in the Champions League, but he might be good enough to get us up to mid-table. When he came in he might have been against Leicester. I mean, everything is in the arena of how poor this Premier League season has been and how poor some of the teams are in it. And we've seen it again today, and we saw it this weekend. And it's almost comical to see if it didn't hurt so much, because the defeats still hurt. And like I said, this is like a romantic of the club. Like, I love the club so much that I still get hurt by the defeats like I was when I was 15, even though I'm so used to them now and the nature of them. And like, we can talk about whether it's a new low or whatever, or how many we're going to see of them. But there's so many common things, and one of the themes in there is Victor Lindelof's defending, like you said. 275 games, Ed.
It's really bad. It's really bad. He wasn't the only poor performer today by any means. I just, before the bottom half of the internet gets on at me for that, but he was shocking, right? I think he's involved in 3 of those goals. The second goal, Harvey Barnes' second goal, was that the one where it went twice across the box, or was it the run through the centre? Either way, they're both all right. I forget which order of things they were.
It was the Livramento just walked past Dallo and then put it into the box.
Walked past Dallo, yeah. Place it across, Lindelof staring at it, and it comes back and Harvey Barnes scores. The third goal is where Harvey Barnes just runs in a straight line, and everyone just it's like the parting, it's Passover, It's the parting of the fucking seas here. And like all the United players got out of the way and were like, here you go, mate, score. Well, and he did.
This is one that I would say is systemic, but I do think that we had this problem under Ten Hag as well. So I think it's one of those where, where you put the seeds into a defender and they're so used to playing a certain way, and they can't get out of that way of playing. They'll turning back all the time, turning back. Your option is the backwards option. Instead of being braver and hitting it forward, your propensity to increase danger is something like 5 million %. I can even tell you that your ability to concede a goal increases by a monumental percentage if you are in a difficult position and you play it backwards. Just belt the bloody thing forward. I mean, Sam Allardyce went in doubt in that, but what we did, Mazraoui, he turned back and he started moving. Now, multiple times that happened today where a United player turned back, and it happens, it's a feature of the system or a feature of the squad where they turn backwards, they run into a blind alley backwards, which already the alarm bells are ringing. Now, when he let go of the ball, Eriksen and Lindelof were still in a position to challenge. Who scored the third? Was it Barnes?
Harvey Barnes, yeah.
So they were still in a position to challenge Barnes, but obviously they did not. They declined the opportunity to do that. They were close enough to do it, or just take the bloody player out, because that's what you do in that situation. You regroup.
Well, for all the criticism that can be levelled at Harry Maguire and Matthias de Ligt, right, and they're not complete players by any means, they do box defend. They know how to defend. They're going to kick someone if they have to, or clear it, make the headers, do the basics. Lenny Yoro, we're still going to work out whether he can do that. He looks like he's going to be a high quality player, but I think he's still quite raw. Mazraoui, nice touch player, not a box defender by any means. He's good in all rounds. Victor Lindelof is just nothing to him at all. I just can't believe. I'm sorry, I've mentioned him like 75 times on this one, but I cannot believe he spent 8 seasons at United. It's just incredible. But yeah. I mean, for today's game, we could have done with de Ligt and Maguire, and I think we'd have seen something different because it would have been a bit more back to basics. It's not going to be the priority in the summer, buying new central defenders, I think. I mean, Lindelof will go, so will Johnny Evans, and that's as much about saving money as it is about, moving forward in terms of the squad. But I don't think they'll replace him if Luke Shaw can stay fit, because there'll be other areas that'll be a priority. We'll see. Maybe there's a cheap deal they can do somewhere, but no one covered themselves in glory today. And then the fourth goal, Jesus fuck. Just as we're like, Altay hasn't made any terrible mistakes today. Maybe he's done enough to keep his place. That's just just a little clip over the top. He's trying to play it into Rasmus Højlund. Dangerous ball anyway, because you know it doesn't stick to Rasmus Højlund. He's just trying to play a simple clip. Much safer to go wide. But this is coming back to this thing about him not being that good with his feet. Just terrible, terrible pass.
Yeah. And I don't understand what United's midfield was doing at that point, because they had so many players.
They all pushed up.
They were all ready to pounce from the mistake, and we weren't reactive to that. And I'm like, well, they've done it multiple times. You are on your knees, and there's no safety switch in there. From a lot of experienced players at that point who were on the pitch, there was no one like Bruno and Eriksen. Was Eriksen still on the pitch? I think he stayed the full. Did he play the full?
I understand. I can't remember if or when he came off. Kobe Mainoo came on at some point.
Yeah.
Now Eriksen stayed on for the full game.
Yeah. So Bruno and Eriksen should have had something within them to like, all right, calm this down a little bit because it's getting out of control. But they didn't. It's just like, well, let it go out of control, because and this is the thing that it's happened that many times with this squad. And this one isn't at the manager. It's definitely at the squad, where someone has to take initiative and say, like, how many embarrassments are enough? Do you know, when it's happening on the pitch, where's the accountability there? Because if it's from no one, then you're saying that no one, even Bruno, like, and I love him. I think he's a great player, and we'd be foolish to get rid of him. But you have to have an accountability there where someone goes like, no, the embarrassment of losing 3-1 in this game is enough. Right? We're not going to pull it back. This is why I think, like, you know, when it comes to Thursday, I think that's why I'd rather the gamble with things like Heaton in goal. And I know you said it being facetious, but I'm being deadly serious. Like, when we go back to, like, say, in Aiden Heaven, I know he's not fit and he's not ready, but I hope that when he is, he's straight back in. Because, like, rather than, like, you know, when we've talked earlier in the season about players who we sort of, the momentum went and they went away, like Fosu Mensah being the case in point that I used when Evan got injured. But I hope that player comes straight back in, because the players that we've seen enough of are the players that will put Amarim's job at risk quicker than it needs to be. That's the point I really want to make with that, because then for that to be not the case, he needs to make the drastic changes.
Absolutely, accountability. We've said it more than once, haven't we? Like, over the years, Wayne, that this is a club that has not been accountable for its mistakes. No one's paid. Apparently, Omar Barada has this philosophy: if you've had 2 years and you've not made it, that's enough. You know, and sometimes you can be overly reactive with players. So, you know, what happened to Josh Zirkzee at Old Trafford earlier this season, a bit too quick to react there, given his progress. At least, you know, we can make a commentary on whether we think he make it or not, but, you know, booing a player's bit harsh after 5 games or whatever. But yes, you know, there's a lot of players at United that we've let us down over and over and over again over the years. I'm not suddenly going to not let us down. Aiden Heaven was on the bench today. I'd be tempted to play him. I think Maguire would definitely come back in. Then there is the question of, like, who are the players who play around him? I suspect Lenny Yoro has not done anything too drastically bad today to get dropped. So it'll be Yoro on the right-hand side, Maguire in the middle for Lyon. We might as well talk about Lyon now. The left-sided one's an interesting one. Is it Mazraoui, who didn't have the best game today, kept falling over? Yeah. Where's some real studs? It's the northeast. It rains, you know. Like the blades they wear today, they're about half an inch, you know, like a centimetre long or less actually. And they're these blades, and as soon as it's a soft pitch, they all fall over. But they just rather do that in the same way that they're basically made of paper, these boots these days, and they're all breaking their metatarsals as a result. But there's a question over Mazraoui. Is he playing well enough at the moment? Is it him? Experienced player, big game that you want, or the other option, of course, Luke Shaw had half an hour today, could play it on the left side, or Aiden Heaven, who was on the bench and must be fit enough.
So I would go with Evan because it's fresher, right? But just a point on Zirkzee. By the way, two different points on Zirkzee. First of all, you're talking about lightweight boots, lightweight shin pads, and I don't know what he wears, but it must be like no bigger than a bloody iPod. It's terrible.
They're tiny.
But,
they all wear these really tiny ones. They're about the size of a passport.
Yeah,
and they're super thin. Yeah, you might as well not bother.
Might be smaller than that, actually, because it looked really, really small. Oh, and I don't want to be too cruel to him, but he must be the first player who ever got a hamstring injury from breaking out into a jog. Which
I know. I couldn't help myself on Twitter. I was like, he tried to sprint and he's done his hammy. I feel sorry for him because he's in the best form, of his time at the club. He does plenty of things well. My doubts about him are, for a striker in the Premier League, having zero pace, you have to be absolutely brilliant at everything else, and he's not a particularly good finisher. So anyway, go on.
No, yeah, my point, an overall point on Zirkzee, and going back to the frustration showed by the fans in December, and I don't want to bang on this point, but I think now we've got enough time to speed in the past, and I think an overall point. Sometimes the subject of your frustration isn't necessarily the subject; it's just the way that you can get that out. So, and I think that the idea was, this is a striker who does not score goals. He isn't scoring goals, and we are locked into maybe 3 years, 4 years of watching him play in our attack when we've just got rid of wasters. And he didn't look like he cared that much. He looked like he was just sauntering around. He still looks a little bit overweight. He doesn't, all right.
He's just big boned, I think.
Well, maybe, I've got that problem. I'm sorry, Zirkzee, you're definitely more athletic than I am. I'm not lumbering you with that. But my point is that at that time, all these things were there and he wasn't performing. And so the frustration there is that he's the perfect vessel for that. Like, oh my God, we are getting hammered at home and this player is just sauntering around the pitch and we are locked into watching it for 3, possibly 4 years. And it's either him or Højlund, and neither of them are scoring. So there was a lot of that, and I feel like where like you mentioned his redemption arc, like over the last 3 months, and I don't want to pick on him, but I feel like that's indicative of the whole team. Wherever we have seen whatever we classify as redemption or improvement, it's so pitiful.
Yeah, we're just looking for some hope, Wayne. That's what it is. Like so, like I feel like with him. And we'll get on to more of the Lyon game, but with him, I would be deeply surprised and pleasantly shocked if he makes it as a top Premier League player. I don't think he will. I just don't think he has the raw ingredients. The redemption arc is from getting booed and looking like you're like, what the hell have United bought here, to him looking like a half-competent, competitive player who can score some important goals, like he did in Lyon on Thursday. It was a good header, good finish, got in the right position, all of that. You just don't see it very often. And then when he has the ball, there's just no pace there. It was incredible. That run where he got did his hammy, he's beaten 3 players there just through sheer will, I think, because it definitely wasn't him sprinting past them. They did bounce off him. He's got some strength and the ball does stick with him. Yeah. And he can make some nice touches. Those are the good bits. So the rest of it's not quite there.
Yeah, so Zirkzee's a case study for the overall point that we're making it, because you mentioned Barada's 2-year schedule, right? So first of all, you got the 2 years. So 5 games isn't enough, or however many games it was at that point, but he was that sort of like vessel where United fans were getting that out. But then how many games is enough for what does he turn into? Does he turn into a cult hero? Because he's definitely not going to be an Andy Cole. He's not going to be Eduardo York. He's not going to be a Diego Forlan. Can he turn into a Diego Forlan? That kind of thing. We do not know yet. But then it's like, well, at what point do you take the hit on him? But United's ability to bring in a player, they don't have wiggle room for that. So, like, what do they do? Do they take the hit on him? Where do they say after a year? It's a strange one.
It is a strange one, but I think with him, and the reason why you have way more flexibility when you do deals like Josh Zirkzee one, he had a release clause in his contract. That's why we got him for 35 million or whatever it was, for 40 million euros, and Patrick Dorgy and stuff like that, is that you can then sell them on. And even if you don't sell them on for the same cash price, you're going to come out net even, basically. And so could United get 30 million for Josh Zirkzee to an Italian club this summer? Absolutely. And we'd actually come out ahead on PSR terms, right? You definitely could. I mean, he was the Young Player of the Year last year in Italy, got 10, 15 goals in a decent Bologna side and all of that, right? So it's much, much less risky than the comparison with Rasmus Højlund. You cannot sell him.
Yeah.
Because if you sell him, you take a massive PSR hit. You can say, okay, that's covered with the lack of his wages, but you need to bring another striker in. So that's not true, right? So it's really, really hard. So if United said, take the Brada test, 2 years, hasn't made it, we should move on, they have to accept they're going to make probably a 15 to 20 million pound PSR impairment charge, right? And that is another player they cannot bring in as a result. It's one of those. It's why I was kind of interested in doing the finance pod all along. That's why I started that finance pod with Jamie, so we could get really nerdy on the details like this, because it really does matter. And it's not widely understood how it impacts a club's strategic thinking. But it's why this summer, I think we may see, if we're in the Champions League, we'll see a big deal for a striker. They'll spend 50, 60, 70 million on a forward. And that will be paid for by outgoings, hopefully. Touch wood. And then a few smaller deals. If we don't make the Champions League, that's a real problem for doing that big deal. And it'll be a younger forward that comes in, a Liam Delap style deal. 30 million. You can take a risk on him. It's just in the context of then having two other forwards who can't score. Oh, that's squeaky bum time that one is, isn't it? Anyway, we should get back to Lyon on Thursday, because this is literally our biggest game of the season.
Yes, it is.
What do you reckon the team is? Who's he going to go for? What would your 11 be? Okay, let's try and rationalize it out here. What's he going to go with?
No, I don't. I'm projecting that I want bold change. I don't think we're going to get it. I think it's going to be more of the same. I think
it'll be back to something that looks similar to the City Lyon games. Yeah,
he'll have to bring an Onana back now. I don't think he'll go Eaton, even though I would. I genuinely would go with Tom Eaton, but I think he will bring back an Onana.
There's more chance of an asteroid hitting the Earth and taking. I mean, to be honest, Liverpool are about to get their 21st title, so I'm looking at the size going, yeah, why not? Is that the worst situation that could happen? Yeah, Onana will be back in.
20th title, not 21st. Let's not 20th.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, unfortunately, Onana, but I do think that then. So, great quote from, because everyone's referencing the Jim Leighton and Les Sealey debate, which is very timely.
Yeah, well, you got it right.
He did, but his quote was, Les Sealey wasn't a better goalkeeper than Jim Leighton, but he thought he was.
Yeah.
Now, there's something to be said for confidence, and I like that, but I think Sealey never had what Onana has, which is a misplaced confidence an overconfidence in things that he can't do. I think Sealey had confidence in himself, but he knew what he was. Onana doesn't know that he's not as good as he thinks he is. He takes risks that he shouldn't take, and I think that if you bring him back in, I do think that there's the capability for that to go wrong. So that's why, where it sounds like I'm being a bit impulsive and irrational, I do think that as the way that this is played into a narrative has the potential to really hurt United if he makes the wrong decision. So you've got to be very careful with that. But I do think Onana will come back in. Dalot will probably play a bit. What price? I mean, Lindelof will pay the price for a poor performance. Of course he will. But Dalot was dreadful again. Do you know? And
he'll 100% play because there's no other option.
Exactly. Do you know? So what's the consequence of poor performance? There isn't any. But after the 45 minutes that we saw today, there should be. There should be a very big consequence for that. They got away with it today because he's rotated some players. Really, that's what's happened. They've got away with it saying, oh, well, nobody expected us to win. But I think that's a dangerous... Those players are in that those players are in that routine already, don't get me wrong. But I think it's a very dangerous game because I think you can't go into a game as big as this with an attitude like that, which is why
you're 100%. Yeah, you're totally correct about that. And it's also the appendix to that particular thought is this idea that you can turn it on for certain games. Like, are we going to spend the rest of the season getting wasted in the Premier League because on the Thursday night we're going to try and turn it on in the Europa? I don't think football works like that. It's just we've had a very few occasions over the years where a United manager has decided to do that, just give up on the league. We had Mourinho in 2017 basically gave up on qualifying for the Champions League in the league to win Europa. It worked out for him that year. Went wrong later. And Fergie did it a couple of times where it was at the end of a season. He did it in 2001. Did we lose the last 3 games of that season? We were like 19 points clear at that stage or something like that. Or 2001, I can't remember which one, around about then. Lost the last 3 games of the season. Fine. He had more credit in the bank than any manager in the history of management.
Yeah.
That's totally fine doing that. But yeah, for Amorim to, and I don't think he is doing this necessarily. It's the first time I kind of felt he'd made a selection that was based on the next game.
Yeah.
In that way. But the consequences, Dalot will not get dropped. There's a question mark over Mazraoui, who obviously made a horrendous mistake today. Onana will come back in despite the hubris, the pride coming before the fall and all of that, and his hubris with Nemanja Matic last week. And will there be any other changes? I mean, probably almost certainly Casemiro will come back into the side. He got a rest. Harry Maguire will come back into the side. He got a rest. We will see Rasmus Højlund up front, even though we know he can't score. Alejandro Garnacho got a lovely goal today. I mean, he's had a really poor season. The frustration with him is we know he can do better. Like, we've seen bits of the full package. We've rarely seen the full package with him. It wasn't that today, but he got a nice goal and he's a willing runner. He'll probably play because you need some pace. Josh Zirkzee won't because he's done his hamstring. We probably won't see him again this season, which is a shame for him.
Yeah, probably.
And it's looked bad. He just went straight away. So, there won't be lots of consequences for, like Patrick Dorgu will start, not Harry Amas. Harry Amas was not at fault for anything today. He did fine for his debut, a young kid.
Yeah.
By the way, can I just mention this? The wife might be listening, so she won't like this. She was like, there's some hotties in the team today. I was like, who are you talking about? She's like, him, Amas. I was like,
some.
Harry's going to be a good player. He's going to have a fine career if it's not derailed by injuries, and he's had a few, but it's not been horrendous. He will have a good career. Whether it's at United or not, we'll see. But lots of ingredients there. We know he's a good player, and he will go on to have a good career. It was a big risk putting him in today because of the nature of the game. I don't think he let anyone down particularly, but Patrick Dorgu will come back in. It's likely going to be Casemiro, Ugarte, Dorgu, Dalot across that midfield. Maguire, Yoro, Onana. The other one is probably Mazraoui, I'd say, but he didn't have a great game today. We'll see about that one. And then up front is going to be Bruno, Garnacho, and I guess Højlund.
Do you know what
is there enough in there to score goals?
I would try this. I would try Bruno and Menu as the 10s and have Garnacho as a false 9 in the middle. I think I'd try that.
Yeah, he's never done it before. It's funny, I mentioned that a few weeks back on the tactics pod I do with Danish, and he looked at me like I'd just taken a dump in the middle of the floor, but I'd be tempted. I mean, he's a player who he carries the ball really well, so if he comes deep and runs with it, great. He's got pace. He can finish. He's not an efficient finisher, statistically, but we know he can. So I'd be tempted at some point just because, or Bruno's the false 9, although it's rarely worked when he's done that systemically, that is.
Yeah. I mean, Bruno or Garnacho, really. It doesn't really matter where. My point isn't what Garnacho can bring to the role. It's more to do with, like, Bruno has that liberation to play that role, and also the Menu can float around. So they can all move around in those kind of places then.
Rasmus Højlund getting 15 touches and 1 shot in the game, which is, like, statistically very likely with him, is doing no one any good. So I'd be very, very tempted, like you, to make a change there. Can't bring Chidobe in because he's not registered.
Yeah.
Because he'd already played for another club, some weird rules around that and all of that. So, something. Otherwise,
or even Mount.
A goal. We do need a goal.
Mount
Mason Mount. I mean,
for Manu, I'm talking there, not for.
He'd be one of the 10s. Yeah. Amorim's talked about Mount a lot. He likes him. I think the weird thing is the change in system has potentially given Mount a new lease of life at United, because we're like, there's a very clear role he can play. Previously, when he came in, you're like, where's he going to play? Like, he's not playing at number 10 instead of Bruno. He's
Yeah.
not playing at 8 because no manager ever trusts him there. Is he going to play wide? Not in a system where you want quick players. So now there's a very clear role he can play, and the manager likes him and trusts him.
Yeah.
He's just got to stay fit. So another option, yeah.
Yeah, the more I think about it, I think, well, United's best pockets of play, and they've been pockets where we're talking not even passages of 5 minutes. We're talking, like you said earlier, Bruno and Zirkzee with that movement. So it's single moves in single games. I think the best elements of those that we've seen have been with the number of 10s that are in the side. And I think if you lose a centre forward like we have done, then I don't think there's any harm in just flooding the team with the 10s, because I'm not saying we've got any specific goal threat, but you might have more dynamic movement around.
Yeah.
So if you, like, say you've got 3 or 4 10s in the side, like let's say Ugarte or let's say Casemiro and Ugarte will play in there. But like say if you played, let's say Casemiro and Menu or Ugarte and Menu, and then put Mount and Fernandes and said, all right, when one makes a run, the other one drops back. So Menu and Fernandes can kind of interchange with that. And then you've got Garnacho there. You've got 4 players who are moving around. It might not amount to very much, but it might amount for something. And the thing is, it's very different to what we've tried so far. It fits within the system. And if you've got, for example, an Evan coming in there who's more liberated with the ball, he's less struggling with or hamstrung with the kind of issues that the other players are. That if you have a few of those players in there that are free of that kind of burden, then you might have a more liberated performance. Like Dogu seems unaffected by it. So if you've got Dogu, Evan, all these players moving around, I think that... No, I don't know. Just a thought.
All right, well, biggest game of the season. This is not a particularly good Lyon side. You know, I know they came back at us the other day. We should have managed that game much better than that, but this is a particularly bad United side, quite an average Lyon side. We should, even though we've got all our problems, dispatch this lot, sounding very Onana-like there. But you know, like, there's not much in that Lyon side, honestly. It's just, we're not in a particularly good position. But, you know, you look at this competition, and there's no one in this competition that, you know, Eintracht Frankfurt are not having a good season. Spurs having a terrible season. Lazio just lost 2-0 at Bodo Glimt. We'll see where that one goes. They've been probably the best team in this tournament so far, Lazio, but again, they're not going to win Serie A. You know, they're not the best team in Italy. On our side of the draw, Rangers and Athletic, you look at Athletic Bilbao and go, okay, we've had a few tough games over there down the years. Not at Rangers. At Athletic Bilbao, which I'm going to assume they'll win that home leg. Yeah. You know, this tournament is open, right? It's this year full of not particularly good teams. Like, some years you get a very good team in there. This year that is not true. And, you know, it's open.
Well, we'll probably have you'll have Matic on the pod in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, Nemanja, if you want to come on at any point, you're welcome to. You want to take me to task for saying your team's rubbish, I will happily have a chat with you. All right, Wayne. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Everybody, I know you've sat through an hour us moaning, but you can catch this on YouTube if you're listening to it, or everywhere you get podcasts if you're watching it. You can catch the Lost Tapes, which is the series Wayne and I have been doing initially with the late Patrick Barkley, now with an old friend doing the voiceover for the second half of this season, and a cracker this week with an hour of Roy Keane going off on. I love, by the way, in this particular episode, the change in his accent over the years from that thick Cork accent to start with to not so much 15 years later. But yeah.
Very
good. All right. Bye now.